Have you ever had one of those days where um, you finally sit down, maybe you're in your car in the driveway,
Oh, yeah, just staring at the steering wheel.
exactly, or, just sitting on the edge of your bed, and you just feel utterly exhausted?
Mhm.
I'm talking about a deep, bone-weary anxiety,
Mhm.
or just this profound overwhelm. And your immediate first thought is usually, what is wrong with my brain?
Right, like, why are my coping skills so bad today?
Yes. The automatic assumption is that you are malfunctioning.
Right.
You missed a step or you failed at self-care.
Well, the immediate default in our current culture is to look inward for the source of any breakdown. I mean, we ask ourselves if we're dysregulated or if we need to adjust our medication.
Or download a new meditation app or something.
Exactly. We basically treat ourselves like a faulty machine that just needs a quick, biochemical or behavioral tune-up so we can get right back on the assembly line.
Which is wild. And, well, we're dismantling that exact assumption today.
I'm very excited for this one.
So for this deep dive, we are looking at a stack of sociological data, some historical critiques, and a really fascinating essay titled The Medical Monopolization of Normal Sadness.
It's a heavy title, but it's a great read.
It really is. And the mission for this deep dive is to explore a controversial, but I think really crucial perspective from the source text. What if our widespread feelings of sadness, anxiety, and burnout aren't always mysterious internal malfunctions?
Right.
What if they're actually highly intelligent, logical responses to an exhausting, fragmented modern world?
But before we start breaking down how society shapes our neurochemistry, we do have to establish a very firm caveat from the sources.
Yes, absolutely.
This analysis is not suggesting that clinical depression is fake.
No, definitely not.
Right. It is not saying that severe anxiety is imaginary or that psychiatric medication is inherently bad. I mean, the literature is extremely clear that for many people, medical intervention is a literal lifeline.
Yeah, it's the vital bridge that keeps a person alive long enough to actually participate in the world again. You're not minimizing that at all.
Exactly. The critique we're unpacking today isn't aimed at the suffering individual who's just trying to survive the day.
Right. The essay takes a broader view. It's aimed at a civilization that has learned to medicalize the emotional consequences of its own broken design.
Right, which is a huge distinction.
It is. I mean, America in particular has become extraordinarily skilled at locating pain inside the individual, right? But we remain remarkably reluctant to examine the societal conditions that make so many people break down in the exact same ways.
Yeah, that systemic blind spot is huge.
So to understand how we arrived at this highly medicalized view of normal human suffering, this idea that if you're sad, you must be fundamentally broken, we kind of have to look at how human beings historically processed grief.
Well, the sources point out that every age teaches its people how to interpret their own suffering.
Okay, what does that look like practically?
Like in older societies, grief was never meant to be a solo project. It was held by communal ritual, by religious frameworks, the village structure, even by the changing of the seasons.
So you aren't just expected to go back to work on Monday.
No, not at all. The bereaved didn't suffer privately in a vacuum. They were surrounded by what the historical data calls a symbolic order.
It's symbolic order, meaning like specific traditions.
Exactly. There were structured mourning periods, specific garments you'd wear, community fasts, feasts. These structures gave sorrow a physical and social place to exist.
Wow.
Melancholy or despair had a language that went way beyond individual pathology. Despair was actually seen collectively as a moral signal.
A moral signal.
Yeah, it was a sign that the relationship between a person and the world, or maybe the divine, had somehow been ruptured.
Okay, let's unpack this because I love this comparison. It sounds like historically, Greece was treated like a giant community-held umbrella.
I like that, yeah.
Like when tragedy struck, the whole village huddled under it together. But today, modern America basically hands you an individual raincoat and tells you to weather the storm alone.
That is a great analogy.
And like, if you get wet, the implication is that you must not be wearing the raincoat correctly, or, your raincoat has a biochemical defect.
Right, exactly. And handing someone that individual raincoat, it isolates them from the storm, sure, but it also isolates them from their community.
Yeah.
We're increasingly taught to view our distress as this private biochemical event. It's framed as a malfunction within the self, a disorder, to be managed by a professional rather than a message to be understood by a community.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because this modern shift is incredibly subtle. Giving someone's pain a medical name often appears like deeply compassionate on the surface.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, when someone feels empty or restless or totally overburdened by ordinary life, the language of clinical diagnosis arrives with clarity and immense authority.
It gives it a name.
Yeah, and having a specific name for your pain feels like a massive relief to the listener. If you're a parent drowning in childcare costs or a worker facing layoffs, getting a diagnosis feels validating. It tells you it's not your fault. You have a medical condition.
It does feel validating. But if we connect this to the bigger picture from the text, this shift to viewing pain strictly as a personal disorder is a double-edged sword.
Right. We gain a label, but what are we losing?
We lose the context. The language of diagnosis provides that validating clarity, but it powerfully narrows our field of vision. The sociological data in our stack provides some devastatingly relatable examples of this.
Yeah, the examples in the essay were intense.
They really were. Take a worker who is absolutely crushed by unstable employment, skyrocketing rent, suffocating debt, and meaningless labor. They are taught to sit in a doctor's office and speak primarily about their symptoms.
Wow. Yeah, instead of their circumstances.
Right. Or a student who is suffocating under hypercompetition, permanent digital exposure, and relentless social comparison. They're taught to frame their entire experience as an anxiety disorder.
Or the parent who's collapsing beneath the weight of relentless work hours, medical bills, and just the complete disappearance of extended family support. They're taught to speak about overwhelm or burnout.
Exactly. And in every single one of those scenarios, the pain is entirely real. The exhaustion is real.
Nobody's denying that.
Right. But the interpretation of that pain is incomplete.
Yeah.
Because the suffering has a body, but it also has a social history.
I think if we trace the actual biology of something like debt, it becomes really obvious.
Let's hear it.
Well, the human nervous system is designed to release cortisol when faced with a threat.
Right.
In the modern world, an eviction notice or a staggering medical bill is perceived by the amygdala as a predator.
It's the same biological response.
Exactly. So the body pumps out stress hormones. But when that threat never goes away, the nervous system just stays locked in fight or flight. Over time, that chronic stress literally remodels the brain chemistry.
The receptors downregulate.
Right. The person feels chronically fatigued and depressed, but then the medical establishment looks at that altered brain chemistry and says, aha, a chemical imbalance.
When really the root cause is the landlord and the economic structure, not just a random failure of serotonin.
Yes. Treating the physical symptom without addressing the economic reality is where the therapeutic marketplace becomes incredibly powerful.
Well, the market doesn't need to invent suffering. It only needs to individualize it. When distress is framed exclusively as a personal disorder, society escapes all scrutiny.
That's the key right there.
We stop asking what kind of economic or social structure is producing this much despair in so many people simultaneously. And instead we ask, what chemical or behavioral intervention can help this specific individual keep functioning?
Which perfectly protects the structural status quo. It treats the human being as the primary site of repair and leaves the broken world completely untouched.
Exactly.
And this brings us to a monumental shift in how this individualization was weaponized. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the historical critiques point to a very specific pivot point.
Ah, yes, 1997.
1997. This was the year the US FDA relaxed the rules, opening the floodgates to direct-to-consumer prescription drug advertising on television, which, globally, remains extremely rare. Right.
Oh, yeah. The vast majority of developed nations ban it completely. It's almost exclusively an American phenomenon to this degree.
So what did that actually do?
Well, the television screen essentially transformed into an informal clinic. The mechanism of how this changed medicine is profound. Before 1997, a patient went to his doctor, described their life and their physical ailments, and the doctor used their expertise to diagnose the issue.
Right. Standard practice.
But after 1997, a patient could sit in their living room, watch a 2-minute highly produced commercial, diagnose themselves, and walk into the doctor's office demanding a specific brand name pill.
That's a huge power shift.
Huge. The pharmaceutical commercials were providing, essentially, emotional instruction to the public.
I remember the imagery of those ads so clear.
The black and white ones.
Yes. The gray-toned kitchen, the distant spouse, the person staring blankly through a rain-streaked window.
The muted family dinner table.
Exactly. And then, the soft return of vibrant color and a gentle voiceover, inviting the viewer to ask their doctor if this specific product might be the answer to their quiet desperation.
It's very effective marketing.
It's dark genius is what it is.
Hmm.
It was a masterclass in honoring the surface of human suffering, but quietly controlling its meaning. Because they never asked why the viewer was lonely.
Right. The ads never explored why adulthood suddenly felt like an endless financial emergency, or why the modern nervous system was constantly overstimulated to the point of collapse.
They just offered a branded, patented destination for the pain.
The locus of diagnostic power shifted heavily toward the advertising agency. And, the source text is clear. This isn't some grand mustache-twirling conspiracy.
No, it's just business.
It's far more banal than a conspiracy, which makes it far more entrenched. It is simply a highly efficient business model. Once sadness enters the marketplace, it can be categorized,
Coded for insurance.
prescribed, refilled monthly, tracked by smartphone apps.
Managed by corporate wellness coaches.
Exactly. And ultimately monetized on a massive scale.
So we are taking the natural friction of being human and turning it into a consumer journey.
Yeah. But if our natural sadness is being packaged purely as a malfunction to be medicated, what happens to the actual meaning behind our emotions?
We strip them of their intelligence.
Right. The source texts argue heavily that emotion is not just biological noise interrupting our economic productivity.
It's so much more than that.
Emotion is one of the primary ways human beings perceive truth before they can even articulate it intellectually.
Let's break down the intelligence of those emotions because I thought this was beautifully written in the essay. Grief tells us that something mattered deeply. Anger tells us that our boundaries or our dignity have been violated.
Right, they're messengers.
Fear tells us that our environment is genuinely unsafe. Numbness tells us that the self is withdrawn from an environment it can no longer inhabit honestly or safely.
And sadness.
In its deepest form, sadness is a rational, highly logical protest against meaninglessness or isolation.
And a mature society listens to those signals and adjusts its structures. A commercial society packages those signals into products.
And a frightened society suppresses them entirely.
Exactly. The flaw in the American model is confusing the location of a symptom with the origin of the wound. Just because sadness occurs in the nervous system, that doesn't prove the nervous system created the sadness in isolation.
Right. Tears physically originate from the body, but grief comes from loss and meaning and circumstance. So our emotions are basically the check engine light in a car.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah, and it's like looking at the check engine light blinking on the dashboard and concluding that the dashboard itself is broken.
Right. Let's fix the blinking light.
Exactly. The American medical model basically says the light is blinking, so let's unscrew the bulb or rewire the dashboard so it stops. But the light is just an indicator. The car is actually out of oil. Fixing the light doesn't change the fact that the engine is grinding itself to pieces.
Stripping our emotions of their intelligence like that leads to what the authors call a quiet moral scandal.
What's a scandal?
The scandal is that, on a societal level, symptom management is being mistaken for actual healing. We measure human health largely by operational capacity, meaning, can this person return to the workforce?
Oh, wow. So someone takes the medication, they go to the mandatory corporate mindfulness seminars, they download the breathing app, and suddenly they can answer emails again.
Yep, they're functional.
They can endure the 2-hour commute, go back to their cubicle, and pay their bills. And the system reads this as a successful recovery.
It reads as recovery because the capitalist system values functionality above all else. But, humans were not born merely to remain operational.
Yeah.
The person hasn't been restored to wholeness. They've simply been restored to functionality. The core purpose of human life cannot be reduced to the sheer ability to endure an arrangement that should have been questioned or dismantled in the first place.
So returning a profoundly burnt out worker to the exact same assembly line that broke them is not healing, it's maintenance.
Exactly, it's maintenance.
We are essentially asking medicine to absorb the cascading failures of our politics, our economics, our disappearing communities. We've forced doctors to become the repair technicians of a civilization that absolutely refuses to redesign its machine.
And therapists are put in the impossible position of acting as witnesses to suffering produced by systemic conditions they have zero power to change.
The clinic is just receiving the sheer volume of despair that the culture refuses to confess to creating.
Right. And you have to remember, this medicalization didn't just force its way into a thriving society. The pharmaceutical and therapeutic solutions entered a world that was already hollowed out.
An emotional vacuum.
Yes. Over the last several decades, we've seen the systematic dismantling of strong extended families, stable physical communities, meaningful and secure work, shared civic rituals.
All the things that used to hold up that umbrella of grief.
Exactly. When all of those older communal containers for human pain disappear, the market eagerly steps forward to fill the void.
The market becomes the substitute priest, the substitute village, the substitute friend, the substitute healer.
But it can't give us the lost community back, because community isn't profitable in the same way. But it can absolutely sell us temporary relief from its absence.
We buy solutions for our isolation instead of dismantling the structures keeping us isolated.
One of the sociologists in our stack uses a phrase that grounds this entire discussion. They call it the biological reality of sociology.
I love that.
We cannot treat human chemistry as if it floats in a vacuum, entirely separate from the conditions of life. Cortisol has an economic context. Panic often has a physical address.
Panic often has an address. That is a staggering way to frame it.
It really is.
But, okay, let's look at the practical reality of this for the listener, because we can't romantically time travel back to the 18th century agrarian village.
No, and most of us wouldn't want to, given the other harsh realities of those eras.
Exactly. We live in a hyper-connected, hyper-capitalist digital age. So if we acknowledge that our pain is systemic, how do the sources suggest we restore communal support beyond just buying a pharmaceutical fix? Like, what is the actual path forward?
Well, the literature demands a fundamental shift in perspective, first and foremost. It asks us to stop using individualized treatment as a screen to hide from society's structural flaws.
Okay.
We have to stop trying to medicate our way out of profound meaninglessness or diagnose our way out of deliberate structural alienation. You cannot turn every human wound into a monetized customer journey and still call your society humane.
It requires putting the conditions themselves on trial, rather than constantly putting our own coping skills on trial.
Precisely. The true solution involves recognizing our collective sadness and our burnout as a form of moral authority. It means demanding spaciousness, rootedness, intimacy, and dignity in our everyday lives, and organizing our communities to push back against systems that deny those things. We have to clearly distinguish between a biological illness and a societal injury.
Between a broken brain and a broken world.
Exactly.
And to synthesize all this, I mean, therapy and medication remain vital tools in this landscape. They save lives. They give people the baseline stability needed to actually fight back.
Oh, absolutely. They are crucial.
But they should be stepping stones toward a better life, not silencers used to endure a miserable one.
The greatest danger facing us isn't that millions of people are getting psychiatric treatment. The danger is that they get treated just enough to stop asking why they and millions of their peers needed treatment just to survive ordinary life in the first place.
That is the ultimate blind spot of our modern approach. Offering temporary relief without demanding structural transformation, prioritizing operational functionality while completely ignoring human wholeness.
It's a huge trap.
It is. So we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today, something to carry with you beyond this discussion. If your feelings of burnout, anxiety, and overwhelm are actually deeply intelligent, rational protests against an exhausting, fragmented world, what is one small thing you can do today to honor that protest?
That's a great question.
Not something you buy, not a productivity app you download, but a genuine, unmonetized connection you make with someone else to remind yourself that you are a human being, not just a machine built for operational endurance.
It's a question that challenges the very foundation of how we live day to day.
It really does. The next time you're sitting in your car in the driveway feeling that heavy wave of exhaustion, remember, your check engine light is on for a very good reason.
Oh,
Don't just blame the dashboard.
well said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking the big questions, and we'll catch you next time.